General David Petraeus, the architect of the surge of troops in Iraq, which many consider to be a success. So it's no surprise that the White House is considering a similar move for Afghanistan. However, administration advisors are split on that surge because of the potential costs involved in lives lost and money spent. Linda Bilmes, co-author with Joseph Stiglitz of the $3 trillion war about the war in Iraq, says the White House must consider those costs before committing to a wider war in Afghanistan. She's also a professor of public finance at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Professor Bilmes, welcome to Bloomberg News.
Thank you.
Professor, you wanted to make an important distinction, I'm told. The consequences of the war in Afghanistan, if expanded, it could lead to more financial insecurity for the U.S. Please explain what you mean.
Well, when we look back at the Iraq experience, we were told initially that the war would be a short war, a quick war, and that it would cost $60 billion. And you recall at that time, the economic advisor to President Bush, Larry Lindsey, had said that it might cost $200 billion, and he was actually fired for suggesting that amount. Now, in the current situation, there is no question that, the administration understands the complexity of the Afghanistan situation. They understand the length of time that is involved, but we don't really hear people talking about the cost. We don't really hear people examining what is the actual cost and how do we go about paying for it.
What are the monthly costs for Afghanistan and Iraq?
Well, right now, we spend about $10 billion a month in Iraq. We spend about $3 billion a month in Afghanistan. If we were to add more troops there, we would be spending $4 to $5 billion a month in Afghanistan, but that's only the upfront cost. One of the things we know from the Iraq experience is that there are a lot of long-term costs of taking care of wounded veterans for the rest of their lives, of paying medical care and disability benefits to veterans, of replenishing military equipment that's used up, and paying interest on the money we are borrowing to fight the war. So that really doubles the amount that it costs. So we're not really looking at 4 or 5. We're really looking at $10 billion a month for an expanded Afghanistan effort.
And speaking of borrowing, obviously that's how we've been funding these efforts thus far. Why can't we just keep on doing that, since indeed, even though there have been some threats from the Chinese or some sort of chest thumping in terms of borrowing, they have continued to buy our debt?
Well, I think it's very important to understand that we are a country that doesn't have money. We have a $12 trillion debt. We are more than $1 trillion in the hole just for this year. And so the question is, if we're spending money, where are we going to get it from? Now, it's one thing if you're spending money on a stimulus package, that's investing in ourselves. That's like spending money on going back to school if you're unemployed. It's another thing if you're spending money that you don't have on something that doesn't have a positive economic benefit for the United States. I'm not saying that that is the entire issue here, but that is one of the issues that was not considered in Iraq. It therefore led to a rise in oil prices. It was one of the contributors to the problems, the economic problems that we have suffered. And if we are looking at the Afghanistan choice, we need to consider what it would cost, where we would borrow the money from, what the options are for financing the war, and what are the consequences for the economy.
So, Professor, just 30 seconds left here. So what's the alternative then?
This is the first war, the Iraq War, since the Revolutionary War, where we have borrowed money from overseas. Previous wars have been financed through tax increases, through U.S.-paid war bonds, such as in World War II, and by cutting spending in other areas.
Okay, Professor, thank you very much for joining us. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Our thanks to Linda Bilmes. She's author and professor at Harvard University.